Have you ever been sitting in a quiet room, maybe reading a book or just lost in thought, and you've seen it? That flicker of movement right at the edge of your vision. A fleeting, dark shape that vanishes the moment you turn your head to look directly at it. We've all experienced it. We dismiss it. A trick of the light, a floater in the eye, a misfiring neuron in our tired brain. It's a momentary glitch in our perception, a phantom we create and then banish with a blink. But what if it isn't? What if that dark shape wasn't just a trick of your own mind? What if it was real? What if millions of people all over the world, from every culture, every background, and every walk of life, are seeing the exact same thing? Not just a random flicker, but a distinct, recurring shape. A figure that is dark, darker than the shadows it hides in. A figure that has a form, a human silhouette, but no features. What if this thing is not just a fleeting glimpse, but sometimes it lingers? What if it stands in the corner of your bedroom while you sleep? What if it watches you from the end of a long, dark hallway? Tonight, we are venturing into the shadows. We are investigating one of the most widespread, most consistent, and most deeply unsettling paranormal phenomena reported in the modern world. This isn't a ghost story tied to a specific haunted house or a cursed object. This is a haunting that seems to be everywhere and nowhere all at once. It's a phenomenon that lives in the periphery of our vision and in the deepest, most primal corners of our fear. We are talking about the phenomenon of shadow people. We will explore the chillingly similar accounts from witnesses across the globe. We will categorize the different, terrifying forms these entities are said to take, from the simple lurker to the infamous and malevolent figure known as the Hat Man. We will delve deep into the scientific and psychological explanations, exploring concepts like sleep paralysis and the tricks our own brains can play on us. And then we will cross over into the speculative, into the supernatural experiences that defy easy explanation, and ask the question that lies at the heart of this mystery. Are shadow people simply a product of our own neurology, a glitch in our internal software? Or are we catching a terrifying glimpse of something else? Are they paranormal entities, interdimensional beings, or something far older and more sinister, watching us from the darkness that lies just beyond the light? So take a moment. Notice the shadows in the room around you. Notice how they stretch and shift. And try to convince yourself that they are empty. Because tonight we're going to find out what happens when they're not. Before we can begin to dissect the theories, we must first understand the experience itself. The phenomenon of seeing shadow people is so deeply personal and yet so universally described that it's almost as if the witnesses are all drawing from a shared, terrifying well of experience. The reports, whether they come from a teenager in Ohio, a grandmother in Japan, or a soldier in Afghanistan, share a remarkable and chilling consistency. Let's build a typical encounter from the thousands of accounts that have been collected over the years. It often begins in a place of comfort and perceived safety, your own home, usually at night. You might be in bed, drifting on the edge of sleep, or perhaps you've woken up for no apparent reason in the dead of night, that strange 3 a.m. hour when the world feels thin and quiet. The room is dark, but not completely. There's the faint glow of a street lamp through the window, the soft light from a digital clock. And that's when you see it. At first, it's just a patch of darkness that seems wrong. It's a shadow in a place where a shadow shouldn't be, or a shadow that is darker than the surrounding shadows, a void that seems to absorb the light around it. As your eyes adjust, you realize this patch of darkness has a shape. It's the silhouette of a person, typically a man, standing perfectly still. There are no clothes, no hair, no facial features. It is a three-dimensional shadow, a solid black cutout against the lesser darkness of the room. And then comes the feeling. It is perhaps the most consistent element of any shadow people encounter. It is a wave of pure, irrational, primal fear. It's not just the fear of seeing an intruder in your home. Witnesses describe it as something deeper, a feeling of absolute dread, of being in the presence of something ancient, malevolent, and utterly alien. It's a cold, paralyzing terror that seems to emanate from the figure itself. You feel, on a soul-deep level, that this thing is not human and that it wishes you harm. For many, the encounter ends there. They blink and it's gone. Or they hide under the covers, and when they finally find the courage to look again, the room is empty. The figure has vanished as silently as it appeared, leaving only the lingering residue of terror and the pounding of a heart in the silent room. But for some, the experience is far more direct and far more terrifying. This is where the phenomenon intersects with one of the most frightening human experiences imaginable: sleep paralysis. Imagine the scene we just described. You wake up in the middle of the night. You see the tall, dark figure standing in the corner of your room. The wave of dread washes over you, and you try to scream, but no sound comes out. You try to move, to run, to fight, but your body is completely, utterly paralyzed. You are a conscious, terrified mind trapped inside a useless vessel of flesh, forced to lie there and watch as the shadow figure begins to move. Sometimes, it just watches you, its presence a form of silent psychic torture. Other times, it moves slowly, deliberately, towards your bed. Witnesses have described feeling an immense pressure on their chest, as if the entity is sitting on them, suffocating them. They feel a sense of malevolence so profound it feels like their very life force is being drained away. These sleep paralysis encounters with shadow people are not just frightening. They are deeply traumatic supernatural experiences that can leave a person with a lifelong fear of the dark, a fear of their own bedroom, a fear of sleep itself. And then there are the rarest and perhaps most disturbing encounters of all: the sustained, waking sightings. In these accounts, the witness is not in bed, not on the edge of sleep. They are wide awake, going about their day. And the figure doesn't vanish. It's seen standing at the end of a hallway or in a doorway just watching. When looked at directly, it doesn't disappear. It holds its ground. And sometimes it acknowledges that it has been seen. Witnesses have described these figures turning their head to look at them, despite having no visible face, before either dissolving into the shadows or, even more unnervingly, simply walking through a solid wall. These waking encounters shatter the easy explanation that this is all just a dream or a trick of a sleepy mind. They suggest that these entities are not confined to the twilight hours, but can and do cross over into our waking sunlit world. The consistency of these accounts, from the appearance of the figures to the feeling of dread they induce, has led paranormal researchers to attempt to categorize them, to create a kind of field guide to the denizens of the dark. Over years of collecting and comparing thousands of first-hand accounts, researchers and experiencers have identified several distinct and recurring types of shadow people. It seems that not all shadows are created equal. First, we have the most common type, often referred to as the lurker or the benign figure. This is the classic shadow person, the one most often seen as a fleeting glimpse in the periphery. They appear as a simple, human-shaped silhouette, usually seen for only a moment before disappearing. They are typically observed standing still in a corner or darting quickly across a room or hallway. While their appearance is startling and can induce a momentary jolt of fear, they are not generally associated with the overwhelming sense of malevolence or dread that characterizes other types. They seem to be simple observers, bystanders on the edge of our reality. It's almost as if we are catching a glimpse of them by accident, and they are as surprised to see us as we are to see them. Some have even speculated that these are not entities at all, but perhaps a kind of psychic residue or a replay of a past event, like a traditional ghost, but one that can only manifest as a dark shadow. Next, we have a far more specific, far more sinister, and perhaps the most famous type of all. This is a figure that has become an icon of paranormal folklore. This is the Hat Man. The accounts of the Hat Man are chillingly specific and consistent across vast geographical and cultural divides. He is described as a very tall shadow figure, often over 6 or 7 feet, with a distinct outline. And, as his name implies, he is always seen wearing a hat. The style of hat varies in descriptions. Sometimes it's a fedora, with a brim that casts his non-existent face into even deeper shadow. Other times it's an old-fashioned, flat-topped hat. He is often described as wearing a long coat or a cape, Unlike the simple lurker, the Hat Man is almost universally associated with a feeling of profound, soul-crushing terror and pure evil. He doesn't just startle, he terrifies. He is not a passive observer. He is an active, malevolent presence. He is most often seen during sleep paralysis episodes, standing at the foot of the bed or in the corner of the room, simply watching, his presence radiating a palpable aura of menace. Many witnesses feel that he is not just watching, but feeding off their fear. Some have even claimed that the Hat Man is a kind of master or controller of the other, smaller shadow figures, that he is the ringleader of these paranormal entities. The sheer number of independent witnesses who have described this exact same figure, a tall shadow in a hat, without any prior knowledge of the phenomenon, is one of the most compelling and baffling aspects of the entire mystery. Then there are the red-eyed shadows. These are similar in form to the standard shadow person, but with one terrifying addition: two glowing, red points of light where their eyes should be. These figures are also considered to be highly malevolent. The presence of the red eyes seems to change the nature of the encounter from one of simple observation to one of predation. Witnesses who see the red-eyed figures often report feeling like they are being stalked, like they are prey. The glowing red eyes are a classic trope in demonic folklore from around the world, and many researchers believe that these specific entities may be demonic or inhuman in nature as opposed to being human spirits. Another distinct type is the hooded figure. Similar to the Hat Man in that it has a defining feature, this entity appears as a human silhouette cloaked in a dark, hooded robe, reminiscent of the classic image of the Grim Reaper. The hood casts the face into absolute blackness, giving it a deeply menacing and ominous appearance. These figures are often associated with feelings of deep sorrow, despair, and a sense of impending doom. While the Hat Man is associated with active malevolence, the hooded figure often brings with it a heavy, oppressive atmosphere of hopelessness. Finally, we have a figure that is a cornerstone of both the sleep paralysis phenomenon and global folklore. This is the old hag or the night hag. While sometimes appearing as a shadow, this entity is often described with more detail. It is typically a hunched, crone-like figure that appears during sleep paralysis. It will climb onto the victim's chest, pinning them down, its weight making it difficult to breathe. Witnesses report feeling its bony fingers, smelling its foul breath, and hearing it whisper threats. While modern science has a name for this experience, sleep paralysis, the consistency of the form of the attacker, the old hag, has been a part of human folklore for centuries, suggesting that this is not just a random hallucination but a specific, archetypal fear embedded deep within the human psyche, or perhaps a real entity that has been preying on sleeping humans for millennia. This taxonomy of terror gives a structure to the phenomenon, but it doesn't bring us any closer to an answer. It only deepens the mystery. Why are so many people seeing these specific forms? Why a man in a hat? Why a hooded figure? To answer that, we must first turn off the paranormal flashlight and step into the brightly lit world of science and psychology, because the human brain is, in many ways, the most haunted place on Earth. When faced with a phenomenon as strange and widespread as shadow people, the scientific approach is to first look for explanations within ourselves. Is it possible that these terrifying supernatural experiences are not an intrusion from an outside reality, but an artifact of our own complex and sometimes faulty biology and psychology? The answer is a resounding and, for many, a comforting yes. There are several powerful scientific theories that can account for many, if not all, of the reported sightings. The most powerful and widely accepted explanation, especially for the encounters that occur in bed, is sleep paralysis. We've already touched upon this, but let's break down what's actually happening in the brain. During the REM, rapid eye movement, stage of sleep, when we have our most vivid dreams, our brain releases chemicals that induce a temporary muscle paralysis, a state called atonia. This is a brilliant evolutionary safety mechanism. It prevents us from physically acting out our dreams, from jumping out of bed if we dream we are flying, or punching our partner if we dream we are in a fight. Sleep paralysis occurs when there is a glitch in this system. Your brain wakes up, you become conscious and aware of your surroundings, but your body remains in the paralyzed REM state of atonia. The result is a terrifying disconnect. You are awake, but you cannot move, you cannot speak. Your mind is screaming, but your body won't respond. This state of extreme vulnerability and panic is the perfect breeding ground for hallucinations. And the hallucinations that occur as you are falling asleep are called hypnagogic, while those that occur as you are waking up are called hypnopompic. In this state, the dreaming part of your brain is still partially active. It begins to project dream imagery into your real-world environment. So, you see your bedroom, but you also see a figure standing in the corner, a figure from your dreaming mind. The feeling of a presence on your chest, the classic old hag experience, can be explained by the combination of paralysis and the brain's attempt to make sense of the labored breathing that often accompanies this state. Your brain creates a narrative. I can't breathe, so something must be on my chest. This explanation is incredibly powerful. It accounts for the paralysis, the feeling of a presence, the visual and auditory hallucinations, and the intense fear. It explains why these encounters happen most often in bed. But what about the specific form of the shadow person? Why not a shadow alligator or a shadow telephone? This is where the next scientific concept comes in, pareidolia. Pareidolia is the tendency for the human brain to perceive a familiar pattern, especially faces and human forms where none actually exists. It's why we see a man in the moon, faces in the clouds, or a Virgin Mary on a piece of toast. Our brains are hardwired for pattern recognition, and we are exquisitely tuned to recognize the human form. It was a crucial survival skill for our ancestors, being able to spot a potential threat or a fellow human hiding in the bushes. So, in a dimly lit room full of ambiguous shadows and shapes, a brain that is already in a state of fear or fatigue is highly likely to take those random patterns, a coat hanging on a door, a pile of clothes on a chair, and interpret them as a human figure. A shadow becomes a shadow person through the brain's own desperate attempt to make sense of incomplete information. Another compelling, though more controversial, scientific theory involves infrasound. Infrasound is extremely low-frequency sound below the normal range of human hearing, below 20 Hz. While we can't consciously hear it, our bodies can feel it, and it can have very strange physiological and psychological effects. Research has shown that exposure to certain infrasound frequencies can cause feelings of unease, anxiety, extreme sorrow, chills down the spine, and even the feeling of a presence in the room. Some studies have even suggested it can cause the human eyeball to vibrate at its resonant frequency, leading to visual distortions or the perception of fleeting, shadowy figures in the peripheral vision. In the late 1990s, a British engineer named Vic Tandy was working in a laboratory that was rumored to be haunted. He and his colleagues often felt a sense of depression and saw strange gray figures out of the corners of their eyes. Tandy, a man of science, investigated. He eventually discovered that a new fan installed in the lab was emitting a silent, powerful infrasound wave at a frequency of 18.98 Hz. When he turned the fan off, the haunting stopped. This has led to the theory that some haunted locations, and perhaps some shadow people sightings, could be caused by environmental factors like faulty fans, large engines, or even natural phenomena like wind or earthquakes generating these low-frequency sound waves. Finally, we must consider a range of other psychological and medical factors. Extreme stress, anxiety, depression, and sleep deprivation can all make the brain more susceptible to hallucinations. Certain medications, substance use, and neurological conditions like epilepsy can also trigger complex visual hallucinations of human-like figures. And we cannot discount the power of suggestion. The concept of shadow people is now a well-known internet phenomenon. A person who reads about the Hat Man and then has a sleep paralysis episode is arguably more likely to hallucinate a figure in a hat because that image has already been planted in their subconscious. Together, these scientific explanations provide a powerful and comprehensive framework for understanding the shadow people phenomenon without resorting to the paranormal. They suggest that these entities are not from another dimension, but from the dark, complex, and often mysterious inner space of the human mind. The case, it would seem, is closed. But is it? For every compelling scientific explanation, there is a witness account that seems to defy it. For every argument that places the phenomenon firmly inside our heads, there is a piece of the puzzle that stubbornly remains on the outside. And it is in this gap, this space between what science can explain and what people actually experience, that the paranormal theories take root and flourish. Let's re-examine the evidence. Sleep paralysis is a powerful explanation, but it does not and cannot account for the sustained, waking sightings. It doesn't explain the accounts of people who are wide awake, in broad daylight, who see a shadow figure walk down their hallway and disappear through a wall. It doesn't explain the family who are all sitting in their living room watching television and all see the same dark figure pass by the doorway at the same time. These shared sightings are incredibly difficult to dismiss as individual hallucinations. Pareidolia is also a strong theory, but it struggles to explain the consistency and specificity of the figures being seen. Why do so many people, from completely different cultures and with no prior knowledge of the folklore, report seeing the exact same entity, the tall man in the fedora? If it were just our brains making patterns out of random shadows, we should be seeing an infinite variety of shadow figure shadows with hats, shadows with horns, shadows with 3 arms. But we don't. We see a surprisingly limited and consistent cast of characters. The Hat Man is a transcultural phenomenon, and that is profoundly difficult to explain with simple pareidolia. The infrasound theory is fascinating, but it's also limited. It can only account for sightings in specific locations where a source of infrasound is present. It can't explain why a person might see a shadow figure in their bedroom one night and then see it again months later in a completely different location, like their office or a hotel room. The phenomenon seems to be attached to the person, not the place. This is where paranormal and speculative theories come in. They begin with the premise that the witnesses are not mistaken, that they are not hallucinating, but that they are accurately describing an objective, external reality, however strange it may be. The first and most common paranormal theory is that shadow people are a type of ghost or human spirit. In this view, they are the souls of the deceased, but for some reason they lack the energy or the ability to manifest as a full-bodied apparition. They can only manage to gather enough energy to appear as a dark, 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional shadow. This could explain the lurkers who seem to be just observing the world they left behind. The feeling of fear could simply be our own natural, instinctive reaction to encountering the dead. A more complex and increasingly popular theory is that they are interdimensional beings. This theory proposes that our reality is just one of many existing alongside countless other dimensions in a multiverse. Shadow people in this view are beings from a nearby or overlapping dimension. We don't see them clearly because we are only seeing their shadow as it is projected or bleeds through into our reality. This could explain their fleeting, distorted appearance and their ability to appear and disappear in an instant or walk through solid objects. They are not bound by our physical laws because they are not fully in our physical world. This theory is compelling because it accounts for the sheer strangeness of the phenomenon. Another, less common but intriguing theory is that they are the astral bodies of the living. In occult and esoteric traditions, the astral body is a subtle, energetic double of the physical body, which can leave the body during sleep or deep meditation in a process called astral projection. This theory suggests that what people are seeing is not a ghost or an alien, but the astral form of another living human being who is out-of-body projecting, either intentionally or, more likely, unintentionally during sleep. This could explain their human shape but lack of features, and their silent, ghost-like movement. Then we must confront the darker theories, the ones that seek to explain the overwhelming malevolence associated with figures like the Hat Man and the red-eyed shadows. These theories propose that these are not human spirits at all, but non-human, demonic, or negative entities. These are psychic predators. In this view, these are ancient, malevolent beings that exist in a lower spiritual plane or a dark dimension. They are drawn to human beings and they feed off negative emotions like fear, despair, and sadness. They appear during sleep paralysis not by accident but by design because that is when a person is at their most vulnerable and their fear is at its peak. The Hat Man is not just a scary figure, he is an entity that is actively trying to cause terror in order to gain sustenance. This is a terrifying thought, but it aligns with the intense, personal testimony of those who have had these specific, malevolent encounters. And finally, we have some of the more fringe, but thought-provoking, speculative theories. Could shadow people be time travelers? Are we catching a fleeting glimpse of a person from another point in our own timeline, their image momentarily slipping or imprinting itself onto our present? Could they be a form of unknown natural life, a kind of atmospheric or biological creature that we do not yet have the scientific instruments to detect, a form of life that exists as pure energy or dark matter? The truth is, we don't know. The shadow people phenomenon remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the paranormal world. It is a deeply personal and subjective experience that is also a global, objective pattern. It is a perfect mystery sitting right on the razor's edge between the science of the mind and the strangeness of the universe. The scientific explanations are powerful, and they undoubtedly account for a large percentage of the reported cases. Sleep paralysis is real. Our brains do play tricks on us. But can science, in its current form, account for all of it? Can it explain the Hat Man? Can it explain the shared sightings? Can it explain the profound and consistent feeling of an external, malevolent intelligence that so many witnesses report? Perhaps the answer is not a simple either/or. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps some sightings are tricks of the light and others are something else entirely. Maybe the state of sleep paralysis doesn't create the shadow figure, but instead it simply opens a door in our consciousness, making us vulnerable and perceptive enough to see the things that are standing in the shadows of our rooms all the time. So, I turn the final question over to you. What do you believe shadow people are? Are you convinced by the scientific explanations, or do you think the evidence points to something genuinely paranormal? Have you, or has anyone you know, ever had an experience with one of these entities? Did you see a simple lurker, or did you come face to face with the terrifying Hat Man? I want to hear your stories and your theories. The comments section is a place for us to share these experiences and try to piece together this profound mystery. If you found this exploration into the world of shadow people to be as unsettling and as fascinating as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are so many more shadows to investigate, so many more unexplained experiences to try and understand. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark. Stay curious, stay skeptical, but open-minded, and maybe, just maybe, sleep with a night light on.